Good morning. Tensions are soaring along NATO's eastern flank today, following a provocative move by Russia. The new United States ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, has issued a stark warning that the U.S. and its allies will defend every inch of NATO territory. His comments came during the opening of the UN General Assembly's high-level week, just days after 3 armed Russian MiG-31 fighter jets violated Estonian airspace. According to Estonia's Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna, the jets flew deep into the country's airspace for a full 12 minutes, marking the closest such incursion to the nation's parliament building in years. This incident is being widely interpreted as a deliberate test of NATO's resolve. It follows a recent pattern of similar provocations, including at least 19 Russian drones entering Polish airspace last week and a Russian-origin drone being discovered in Romanian territory. In his remarks, Ambassador Waltz, who was just confirmed to his post last Friday, emphasized the unwavering U.S. commitment to Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. That article stipulates that an armed attack against any member is considered an attack against all, compelling a collective response. The UN Security Council held an emergency meeting on Monday at Estonia's request. There, Minister Tsahkna called Russia's reckless actions a destabilizing escalation that brings the region closer to conflict. Russia, however, has dismissed the reports as groundless accusations. Dmitry Polyansky, Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the UN, attributed the claims to Russophobic hysteria coming from Tallinn and stated there was no proof of the incursion. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Donald Trump is taking decisive action on the domestic front. On Monday, the president signed an executive order officially declaring Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. The order describes the loosely organized far-left movement as a militarist, anarchist enterprise that explicitly calls for the overthrow of the United States government, law enforcement authorities, and our system of law. The White House document alleges that the group uses illegal means to execute a nationwide campaign of violence and terrorism. It specifically cites coordinated efforts to obstruct federal laws through armed standoffs, organized riots, and violent assaults on immigration and customs enforcement officers and other law enforcement personnel. The order also points to the practice of doxing, which involves publishing private information about political figures and activists with malicious intent. The designation of Antifa as a terrorist group has been a stated goal of the Trump administration for some time, though the decentralized nature of the movement has previously complicated such efforts. This executive order marks a significant step in the administration's strategy to confront the group, which it holds responsible for widespread civil unrest. The scope of presidential power was also at the heart of a decision from the Supreme Court on Monday. The High Court issued an unsigned order that temporarily upholds President Trump's authority to fire Federal Trade Commission member Rebecca Slaughter. The ruling allows the termination to stand for now, but the justices have agreed to more fully consider the constitutional questions involved during a hearing scheduled for this December. The case tests the limits of a president's ability to remove officials from independent federal agencies. Slaughter, a Democrat, was first appointed to a seat reserved for her party on the FTC by then-President Trump in 2018. She was later reappointed by President Joe Biden in 2023. Earlier this year, President Trump fired her, with the White House explaining in a letter that keeping her in the post would be inconsistent with the current administration's priorities. The Supreme Court's brief order did not provide a detailed legal reasoning, but it did note a dissent from Justices Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. The upcoming hearing in December will likely focus on the long-standing legal precedent that suggests presidents can only fire the heads of independent agencies like the FTC for cause, such as misconduct, rather than for purely political disagreements. While the courts weigh executive power, lawmakers on Capitol Hill are finding common ground on a pressing immigration issue. a notable bipartisan group of senators has introduced legislation to protect more than 250,000 young immigrants who risk losing their legal status. The bill, called the America's Children Act, is co-sponsored by Senate Majority Whip Richard Durbin, a Democrat from Illinois, and Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, among others. The legislation is designed to help so-called documented dreamers. These are individuals who were brought to the United States legally as children, as dependents on their parents' work visas. However, due to massive backlogs in the green card processing system, many of these young people turn 21 before their family's application is approved. At that point, they age out of their dependent status and are no longer in the country legally, facing the threat of deportation despite having lived in the U.S. for most of their lives. Senator Durbin stated that these individuals are Americans in every way but on paper and are being failed by an outdated immigration system. Senator Paul echoed that sentiment, saying they are contributing members of their communities who shouldn't be penalized by the government's failures. The bill would provide a pathway to citizenship for those who qualify. Finally, we turn to the U.S. economy, where a debate is brewing inside the Federal Reserve over the future of interest rates. Federal Reserve Governor Stephen Miran, an appointee of President Trump, is publicly calling for the central bank to be more aggressive in its rate-cutting strategy. His comments, made at the Economic Club of New York, come just a week after the Fed lowered its key policy rate by 0.25 percentage point for the first time this year. That move brought the new target range to between 4 and 4.25%. While the Fed signaled a conservative outlook, with officials projecting the rate will settle around 3% by the end of 2027, Governor Miran argues that is not nearly enough. He believes the rate should be almost 2 percentage points lower at around 2.5%. Miran warned that keeping interest rates too tight risks unnecessary layoffs and higher unemployment, threatening the maximum employment side of the Fed's dual mandate. He pointed to the current administration's policies, including deregulation, tariff income, and changes to immigration and tax policy, as creating a different economic climate that warrants a more accommodative monetary policy. His position sets up a clear disagreement within the Fed's leadership on how to best navigate the economy moving forward.